All right, so now for something completely different. Our topic today is Buddhist wisdom. This is part 2 of our Sunday series for May. We're honoring the tradition of religious pluralism in America. And because it also happens to be Mother's Day, I thought we might start out with a little motherly wisdom in the form of one of those David Letterman top 10 lists that we are calling Wise Things My Mother Never Said and Never Would Say, but I Wish She Would Have. Okay, you got that? Wise things my mother never said and never would say, but I wish she would say. So we start out with number 10 on the list. Don't bother wearing a jacket. It's bound to get above freezing sometime today. Your mom never said that. Number 9, I don't have a tissue with me, just use your sleeve. Makes perfect sense. Number 8, the curfew is just a general time to shoot for. It's not like I'm running a prison. Number 7, well, if all of the other kids want to jump off the roof, that's good enough for me. Alrighty. Number 6, go ahead and keep that stray dog, honey. I'll be glad to feed and walk him every day. That's usually how it works out, right? No, moms are wise, I'm telling you. Number 5, hey, let me smell that shit. Yeah, it's good for another week. Never will happen, never happen. Number 4, just leave all the lights on. It makes the house look more cheery. Thanks, Mom. All right, and finally we get to number 3. Sure, you can stay home today and play. I used to skip school a lot too. Never gonna happen. Number 2, how on earth can you see the TV sitting so far back? Get your nose right up there. And finally, number 1, here we go. Don't worry about those holes in your underwear. After all, what are the odds that you'll get into an accident today? I'll tell you. That is some true wisdom, and I never heard my mother utter those words, but I sure wish we would have. All right, so now on to the other topic for today, Buddhist wisdom. Did you know that Buddhism is the oldest religion in the world after Hinduism and Judaism? And what do you think is the most common image that comes to mind when people hear the word Buddha? We'll show it to you in a minute here. I remember when I was growing up, if somebody called you Buddha, it wasn't a compliment. They weren't saying that you were wise and enlightened. They were calling you fat, right? Okay, that's because of this image here. This image that comes to us from China, the fat, happy Buddha who has nothing whatsoever to do with the historical founder of Buddhism. This guy is Hotai. He's known as Hotai in Japan and Putai in China. And he's a product of Chinese folklore. He's called the Buddha of the future, who represents prosperity and happiness and things like that. So that's why he looks so happy and he's looking so well fed there. So if you ever get confused, there's a little rhyme that you can use to help you to remember. On the next slide here. Oh, I guess we don't have that. Well, this is what the historical Buddha looks like, and as you can see, he's a pretty skinny fella. His name was Siddhartha Gautama or Shakyamuni. But if we get back to the big Buddha again, the rhyme to remember is that if it's a fat guy, it's Hotai. Okay, fat guy, Hotai. There we go. Yes, if it's a fat guy, it's Hotai. The founder of Buddhism was a skinny guy who's usually depicted doing a meditation posture, just like we see there in that statue. And in fact, after Hotai, the image that most people associate with Buddhism is the practice of meditation. Other religions practice forms of meditation or contemplation, but in Buddhism, meditation is the primary focus. And Buddhism seems to be a really good fit for people in Unity. Have you noticed that? People in Unity have an affinity toward Buddhist teachings because there are a lot of things that we have in common. I practiced Buddhism for over 10 years before I got back to Unity and found a way to get back to my own cultural heritage. And there are a lot of parallels and a lot of wonderful similarities. I think the two practices actually support each other. So there are a lot of reasons why I found Buddhism to be so appealing, but one of the reasons is because I think Buddhism has one of the best senses of humor of all of the spiritual traditions out there. And that may sound odd at first, because a lot of people get the idea that Buddhism is all quiet and serious and mysterious and things like that, but Buddhism is filled with stories about highly regarded teachers doing some wild and crazy things, especially in the Zen tradition and in the Dzogchen tradition. There's a story about a Zen monastery where they're having a cookout. And the abbot of the monastery is working the grill. And so the young monk reverently approaches the roshi at the grill. And the roshi looks up and smiles and says, "Want a hot dog?" And the student replies, "Please, master, make me one with everything." And the master, of course, says, "Okay, here you go. That'll be $1." The monk gives him a 5, and the master goes back to cooking. And the monk says, "Excuse me, master, what about the change?" And the master says, "Ah, yes, change must come from within." Or how about this one? Why don't Buddhists vacuum in the corners? Because they have no attachments. And some people think that Buddhism is atheistic, which again is not technically correct. Buddhism is what you might call non-theistic. They don't have a concept of a creator being or a personal God. Instead, they see the universe as a creative process. Everything is interdependent and co-arising, which is very similar to unity because we talk about God, I think, in very similar terms. When Buddhists talk about the nature and essence of all that is, including us human beings, they use the term Buddha nature. And I remember during liturgy at the Zen monastery where I used to practice, the leader would chant the words, and this was something you would hear over and over again: Buddha nature pervades the whole universe. Sounds like something we say in unity, where we say there is only one presence and one power that is the universe and my life. And for Buddhists, the best way to get to know that Buddha nature is by turning within in the practice of meditation, which is also what we teach in unity. The best way to get to know the one presence and one power is to turn within. We call that the Christ, right? So, when it comes to meditation, there's another rather common misperception that we have to deal with. A lot of people think that meditation is about stopping our thoughts. Anybody ever hear that one? Try it sometime. Good luck with that. Meditation isn't about stopping our thoughts. And this is what a very well-known Buddhist scholar had to say on that point. He said, some people think that Buddhist practice and meditation are about stopping thoughts. As the saying goes, if that were true, a coconut would be enlightened. That's not the case. That's not the case. He says, let's remember that upon attaining enlightenment, the Buddha smiled. There's no struggle involved here. He smiled. This is very important. He didn't have to smile. He could have grimaced or remained neutral. But he smiled. This could be our Zen koan for the morning. What was it that might have caused the Buddha to smile? The Buddha was a real person. His name was Siddhartha, and he was a man of extremes. You might know the story. He was born into extreme luxury, but one day he snuck out of the palace and went into the town and saw that people suffered. He saw that people get old, they get sick, they suffer, and they die. And he couldn't understand, why should people suffer when I'm living this life of luxury? So he made it his life's work to go out and try to find what is the cause of suffering and do something to put an end to it. And so then he goes to another extreme, because the first thing he does is he goes off into the forest and he joins this group of monks, and their practice is to do without as much as they can, to give up sleep, food, water, any form of comfort. They gave it up. And Siddhartha was so good at living this life of extreme deprivation and discomfort that it almost killed him. So he decided he needed to try something else. He got healthy again and decided that instead of living at the extremes, he was going to follow what he called the middle way. He was going to simply go and sit under a tree and meditate until he understood exactly what suffering was all about. And so after many days, the story goes, after many days of meditation, one morning he looked up and he saw the morning star. And the reason he smiled is because it was kind of like finally getting the punchline to a cosmic joke. At the moment of his enlightenment, he's quoted as saying something like this, and this is a translation or a paraphrase of what he's quoted as saying. He says, "Everything is perfect, whole, and complete, just the way it is. All things are perfect, whole, and complete, just the way they are. All we need to do," he said, "isn't it incredible? All sentient beings have the Buddha nature at the very same moment. I and all sentient beings together enter the way." Those are all the ways that it's put, but it right comes down to that one thing, that everything is perfect, whole, and complete, just the way it is. And the only thing that we need to do, and this was the other part of the Buddha's realization, the only thing that we need to do is to wake up and realize 4 simple ideas, or what the Buddhists call the 4 Noble Truths. You've probably heard these before. The first Noble Truth goes something like this: life is suffering. And when we hear it put like that, well, there's a part of us that says, well, no, it's not, right? Because in unity, we're supposed to be positive all the time. How could we even be thinking something outlandish like life is suffering? You know, there's an aspect to unity where people think, you know, we're supposed to be happy all the time, right? Seeing the world through rose-colored glasses. Some people think that Buddhism is pessimistic because of this first statement, that life is suffering. Well, the good news is that that statement doesn't stand alone. There are others that follow. If that was the only thing, that was to it, you know, people wouldn't listen to it. Life is suffering, they'd say, yeah, okay, tell me something I don't know, you know. There are 3 other truths that go along with it. So maybe a better way of actually understanding this is to say that life inevitably brings suffering, right? Regardless of wealth, of social status, physical stature, everyone, everywhere, at some time or another is going to experience sickness, loss, pain, and things like that. Everything changes. Everything changes. And if we go through life trying to cling to what's comfortable and trying to avoid what might be painful, thinking that we can avoid the changes, all we're doing is we're running around in circles. And if we really look at that, what we see is that suffering is largely self-inflicted. That's why the Buddha smiled. That's the joke. Suffering is largely self-inflicted. I had a Zen teacher once who said that when we realize that our suffering is self-inflicted, the only thing you can do at that point is to have a good laugh and then get to work looking at all the places where we're clinging and avoiding. All of the places where we're trying to avoid the inevitable changes and impermanence of life. We say that discomfort is usually unavoidable, but suffering can be optional if we're willing to look at it a certain way. We get to choose. So, if we know that life is suffering, that it's inevitable, and that the cause of our suffering is our own clinging and aversion, treating life as if it's never going to change, then we can do something about it. We can do something about it. The third noble truth says that we can change the way that we think. We can address the root cause of suffering. And here's where Buddhism and unity are on the same page. There are a lot of religious traditions that say we're powerless. We are powerless. And Buddhism and unity say, no, we're not. We're in charge of the way we think, and that's what shapes the way we experience the world. What would it take to be able to truly say that life is good? no matter what's happening around us. To be able to say life is good without having to wear blinders or to live in a state of complete denial, is such a thing possible? Well, again, the Buddha said yes. Unity says yes, it is possible for human beings to reach that kind of freedom from suffering, where we can honestly say that life is good no matter what. These Four Noble Truths are supposed to be empowering. It's like a roadmap to liberation, but like any map, you can't just sit there admiring the map, right? You actually have to get up and take that first step and move, or you're not going to get anywhere. And you know, you don't have to become a Buddhist. You don't have to adopt the trappings of Japanese, Chinese, or Tibetan culture in order to do this practice. You can use your own spiritual practice. You can use the spiritual practice that we have in Unity to avoid clinging and aversion, to stop being deceived into thinking that we can avoid impermanence and change. Just like the Buddhists, we emphasize meditation and introspection, learning a way to penetrate through the delusion, develop clarity of thought. We use denials, we use affirmations. We remind ourselves that appearances there is always a deeper truth beyond what we're usually seeing. We practice forgiveness. We practice generosity or giving. We learn to see the perfection in others. That Christ that we discover within us, we learn to see in others. We develop our inherent powers. We hone our spiritual faculties. And just like the Buddhists teach, this isn't a one day a week thing that we're doing. It has to become a way of life. It has to become a regular daily practice. So this all leads to greater mindfulness. It leads to being able to stop living reactively and start taking responsibility for how we experience life and make better choices in the face of the undeniable fact that everything's impermanent and everything changes. So this is Buddhist wisdom that in Unity we can embrace wholeheartedly. And we guarantee that it will lead to a healthy, prosperous, peaceful, and meaningful life. See you next week.